1. I've had about 3 creepy encounters in my life. This is one of them. A few years ago, I was in my mid-20s and living in London. As an Australian away from home and family for Christmas, my parents and some friends sent me some money as a surprise and told me that I should use it to go to Paris for Christmas and New Year. So I did. I had a fantastic week in Paris, except for one particular ride on the train late at night. It was Christmas Eve day, and I had been on a tour of the Palais Garnier and bought tickets to see the Ballet Raymonda that night. After the ballet, I had plans to go for a nice glass of champagne in a bar or cocktail lounge nearby, which was what I used to do when I saw the ballet or opera in London. But it was a rainy night, and being Christmas Eve, everything had shut early, so I got on the metro to go back to my hostel. But as I had walked around for a bit trying to find a bar, I had missed the flux of people who had also left the ballet and were catching the train. Since I had come home from the ballet, I was dressed up in a floor-length black evening gown, high heels, pearl jewellery, and a black wool cloak. When you're living paycheck to paycheck in London, it's nice to have the very occasional opportunity to wear your nicest clothes. Any excuse will do, so to speak. On the lapel of my cloak was a little silver kangaroo brooch that I often wore when I was travelling, because experience has taught me that people often like Australian tourists a bit, even if they didn't like Brits or Americans, and this was especially true in France. It was almost midnight when I got on the train, and it was pretty empty, not completely deserted, but I wasn't the only person either. As I got on, 2 guys who had been on the platform also boarded, and despite there being plenty of empty seats, they sat down right near me and started trying to talk to me. I politely told them in French that I could not understand them and that I only spoke English. My French was just travel basics, thinking that they would leave me alone. But instead, they asked me in heavy accents where I was going so dressed up, and I politely explained that I was in fact coming home, not going out, keeping details to a minimum without being rude. I'm not a model or anything, but I have a pretty face and a quite open and friendly air about me. I often have conversations with strangers whilst I'm travelling, and I pride myself on being a good judge of character. It's never steered me wrong before, so believe me when I say something just did not feel right about these guys. Often I think people expect creeps to look like creeps, but these guys were really pretty good looking, young and well dressed in casual clothes. One was white with dirty blonde hair and the other black with a close crew cut look. But despite them both being young and pretty attractive, something about the way they had come straight over to me just didn't sit right. The black guy noticed my kangaroo brooch and asked me if I was Australian, telling me that Australian girls were so nice because they were so friendly. He was so obviously trying to find something to butter me up and get a conversation going. Once again, I was polite but brief in my answer. Then the other guy tells me they are going to a party and that I should come. After all, it is Christmas Eve. Now, I've had some pretty awesome experiences meeting new people whilst travelling. I've gone to nightclubs in Turkey with people I just met that day, ended up on a yacht for a week along the Mediterranean coast because of a chance meeting, had drinks in a high-end London club with a charming Colombia businessman who sent me and my friend home with a taxi fare that took me home and just about bought my groceries for a week, etc., etc. All because I took a chance to get to know a stranger. But this time I felt a chill down my spine. I said that I was tired and declined the offer. By this stage, it was just myself and these guys in the carriage of the train, and I'm feeling uncomfortable. I was on line 7, the pink one, of the Paris metro going between Opera Station and Les Gobelins, so not a particularly long trip, just about 10 stops, but they seem to be taking forever. The first guy agrees with his friend and insists that I should come with them. They say it's just a few more stops and keep asking me what stop I am getting out at, asking me where I am staying, say they know the area and can tell me if it's near to there. I tell them again that it's been a very long day, and I'm tired and just want to go to bed. Then the blonde one changes seat and sits right next to me, putting me between the window and him, so if I want to leave I will have to make him move. He starts touching my cloak and says that it's such nice wool. I don't know what to do, so I just stupidly say, "Thank you, I bought it from Zara a few weeks ago," like I'm talking to a fucking friend or something. But on the inside I'm screaming, "Get your fucking hand off my cloak!" And I'm clutching my bag closed, worried I'm going to get robbed, at the very least. Already been robbed of a Tiffany & Co. bracelet charm on the Paris Metro, and I really don't want to get robbed again. All the while, these guys keep looking at each other like they're having a silent conversation as I push myself as far as I can towards the window to get as much room between the seat creeper touchy cloak dude and myself. Now, I only have about 3 stops left, and I'm wondering how I can get off the train because I'm worried these guys will follow me, and I really don't want them to know where I am staying. They are busy telling me that there will be lots of people at the party, and drinks, and that it will be so much fun. They are kind of skeezy too, in the sense that they are saying stuff like, "You are too pretty to just go home tonight. You should come out and have fun." They are trying to flatter me, but it just comes across as slimy and creepy, not at all flattering. I'm starting to panic, and realize just how alone I am as the train pulls into the next station. And to my utter relief, a group of young and slightly drunk partygoers pile into the carriage, and these guys instantly back off a bit. We sit there in silence, my skin crawling, and still worried about getting off the train. But at the next station, the one before mine, these two get up without another word and leave the train. I almost cried with relief, but I was still scared, so I went an extra stop to the Place d'Italie and walked back hurriedly from the station to my hotel. I don't know what they had planned for me, but they were so insistent that I come to that party with them. So insistent that I leave the train. And they left so quickly when the other people got on, that I can't imagine it would have been anything good. 2. It's dawn, so still a little dark even though all the blinds are open in the kitchen. I flip on the light and start feeding the cats as usual. Through the glare of the window, I think I see someone in my backyard, which wouldn't be unheard of as an older lady rents the guest house behind me. She has her own fenced area, though. I get closer and lose my breath as a scraggly, middle-aged stranger is in a robe in my backyard, staring at me. He's standing perfectly still and doesn't look away, which immediately struck me with an "oh shit, I'm in a horror movie" feeling. I stared back for a bit and realized he was looking at the house, not me. I rationalize, thinking maybe he was the older lady's overnight guest and got confused about her living arrangement. Maybe he thinks I'm an intruder. So I step out back and give him a "Good morning, how you doing?" as I walk up and try to determine his eyeline. He answers back normally as if nothing about this situation is weird. Note, he has not made eye contact, he is still staring at my house. I then voice the classic passive-aggressive suburbia threat. "Can I help you?" "I'm your neighbor. I think my kid's toy is on your roof." 2 things. I know my neighbors. He was not familiar. Also, what kid lands a toy on a roof at this hour? I tell him I'll go up and check after work, kind of shooing him out. He doesn't move. Just keeps staring. I repeat, "I'll check after work. You can go." "Which house are you?" "I'll leave it at your door. What is it?" He's silent for a moment as I grow more irritated at his lack of response, and more creeped out. Finally he replies, "Oh, I'm just a couple houses that way." He lackadaisically points in no discernible direction. I say okay and again ask what his kid lost. He speaks again. "Really, I could get it if I could come in and go out that window." He points up at the attic vent. "No, that's not really a window. I promise I'll check later. Have a good day." Again trying to politely shoo him. I've now edged myself over to a loose board from my firewood pile that I could use as a weapon. He continues to stare at the house. His eyes haven't moved yet. I pick up the board and pretend I'm moving it to a table behind him, so I can put him between myself and the fence gate, his hopeful exit. As I'm doing that, he breaks the trance and walks towards my back door. I'm pretty much done with niceties at this point. I run up to block him, board in hand, and deliver the weakest intimidation speech ever. "Look, man, I don't know who you are, but I'm sorry. Maybe I don't remember you, it's early, but I can't let you in my house. Please, I'll look on the roof later." He raises up his hand as if to say, No, I don't mean any harm," and tries to put it on my shoulder. I sidestep and put a few feet between us. He speaks again, in a dazed tone. "I'm sorry. Maybe if I could just use your ladder, I can get up there." I get a little more confrontational and raise the board to show it. Not cocked, but visible. "Dude, I said I'd look later. Please leave. I have to get ready for work." He turns, saunters, and looks at the house again. Now back to his original spot, in a trance again. "Please leave." My yell rolls off him. He isn't even listening. But after a yawn, he does casually make his way back down the side of the house. At this point, I dart back inside and watch him from the windows, cell phone at the ready. He leaves and shuts the gate behind him effortlessly, which, by the way, is hard to do. My friends still haven't mastered the lift and pull gate locking move. I asked around and no one knew who this guy was based on my description, and no one has seen him since. I would say he was mentally ill, maybe homeless and passing through. But he seemed too clean-cut, scraggly, but not dirty. I still don't know what to make of it. It was just too bizarre, how he paid so little mind to trespassing, and being told to leave. And no, there was no toy on my roof or in my yard. 3. This story happened about 2 years ago while I was in university, working on my degree in biology. I had signed up for a trip to gather samples for an experiment some students in the ecology department were going to run. It required the collection of samples from several sites, so they recruited biology, ecology, and forestry majors to help them complete the sampling in a shorter period. The area my group was to take samples from was a few hours from my uni in the Pacific Northwest. There are 9 of us in my group, 8 students and a supervising professor. We got to the campsite in late evening and set up our tents. One of the other students had brought a big container of split pea soup from home and was sharing it with others on the trip. I don't really care for split pea soup, so I declined the offer. Everyone had some except me, one other student, and the professor. Come the next morning, the 5 students who had eaten the soup weren't in the best of shape. They were in the grips of some gnarly food poisoning, and were in no shape to hike for 8 or 9 hours to collect the samples we needed. The professor who was supervising us had originally some rules, such as people travel in groups of at least 2, and we had to return to camp by nightfall. Now those rules were tossed out, to make sure we kept to our timetable and collected all of the required samples. We were just told to do your best to complete the work assigned, as long as you can do it safely. That morning I set out for a long day of hiking. After a mile or so, I ran into the stream I was supposed to follow. I needed to travel about 4 miles upstream, stopping every quarter mile to collect samples of the water and soil. This meant I had to hustle to get back before dark. Halfway through the day, I realized that wasn't going to happen. About 2 miles into my hike, I stopped for lunch, sitting on a log overlooking the stream. The scene was really peaceful until I smelled the cigarettes. It wasn't the smell of a cigarette being smoked, more the musty smell of a heavy smoker's car, where cigarette butts have been left to ferment for weeks on end. I looked around but couldn't see anyone. I just assumed that the wind had blown the scent of some hunter or hiker over to me. But minutes later, the smell hadn't faded. The vegetation in the area wasn't that thick. but there was still a lot of places for someone to duck behind a tree or bush. I was unnerved that someone was apparently staying close enough to me for me to smell them for this long, without so much as a word. I quickly packed up the trash from my lunch and continued up the stream. The musty cigarette smell went away for the next few hours. It wasn't until I arrived at my last sample location, late into dusk, that I smelled it again. The woods were getting really dim by this point. Looking back on it, it was a really stupid idea to stay out so late, as just hiking back to camp in the dark would be pretty dangerous, even without a cigarette-smoking stalker. Having just put the collection tubes in my bag, I shined my flashlight around the darkening woods, looking for whoever was giving off the smell. I didn't see anything that caught my attention. It would actually be more correct to say I saw too many things in the dim light that might have been a head sticking out from behind a tree or someone crouched low in the foliage. I didn't like the idea of being in the dark woods with a stranger, who for the second time was lurking near me without revealing themselves. So I began to double time it back down the stream. I made much better time on my way back, even though it was dark, because I didn't have to stop to take any samples. Even so, I didn't get back to camp till a bit before 10. I was the last one to get back, and everyone but the professor was already asleep. I didn't mention the cigarette smell to the professor, because he seemed tired as it was, and he headed to his bed in the RV soon after I got back. I headed to my tent soon after. At some point in the night, I woke up needing to pee. I decided to head into the woods to do my business, as I knew some of the other students were still feeling ill and needed the RV toilet for more urgent matters than just having to take a leak. I walked about 100 feet into the woods, found a tree, and did what I needed to. As I turned to go back to camp, something caught my eye. Somewhere off in the woods, there was a tiny red glow. I was confused as to what it was, until it flared momentarily, and I realized it was the cherry of a cigarette. I stood there for a while watching the red ember glow fade, then move slightly closer to the ground, as whoever was smoking would take it out of their mouth. Not being able to see the person, I assumed they were watching the camp. I didn't know if they had seen me make my way into the woods or not, as the fire had been doused and the moon was only half full, so there wasn't very much light. I made my way slowly back to camp, as quietly as I could, and entered the RV to wake up the professor. I told him about the person smoking in the woods, and about the smell of the cigarettes earlier that day. However, when we got outside the RV, the ember from the cigarette was gone. My professor woke the other student, who hadn't come down with food poisoning, and we took turns watching over the camp. I didn't see or smell anything else when I was on guard duty, and went to sleep when the professor woke up for his turn. In the morning, the professor, the other student, and I went to where I guessed the smoker had been standing the night before, and sure enough, we found about 10 cigarette butts on the ground next to a tree. The tree itself looked like someone had been twisting and stabbing a knife or other sharp object into it, as the bark and outer layers of wood had been damaged and chipped away. The professor decided the group should head back that day, even though we hadn't collected all the samples we were assigned, to be on the safe side. We packed up camp and drove down the thin dirt trail without incident. The second we got onto the paved highway, though, a white paneled van pulled out of the clearing just off the shoulder and began following us. The van stayed behind us all the way back, pulling off the highway when we did, taking the same surface streets that we did, and only stopped following us when we turned onto the road leading to our university campus. Everyone was freaked out by this, but it was around 9 at night on a weekend, so the security office on campus was closed. We decided to unload the RV and call it a night, as the van hadn't followed us onto campus. I offered to help the professor catalog and store the collection tubes from our trip, so it was another couple hours before I left the biological sciences building and started heading toward the dorm building I lived in. I stepped out into the cool night air and began walking, my professor having left the building in another direction to get to his car and drive home. It was a couple dozen feet outside the building, which was now locked, when I was hit with the musty smell of old cigarettes. I looked around, and about 25 yards away in the darkness, off of the footpath, I saw the cherry of a cigarette smouldering away. I was pretty scared at this point, but hoped it was only a student or some faculty staying late having a smoke. I couldn't completely convince myself of this, as the musty cigarette smell was the same as what I smelled in the woods the previous night. I started down the footpath, and soon passed whoever was smoking. 100 feet or so later I looked over my shoulder, and saw the cigarette cherry bobbing in the darkness. The smoker was following me. This creeped me out a bit more, but I still held it together. That is, until I rounded a small stand of trees and saw a white-paneled van alone in a parking lot. I took off at a sprint toward my dorm building. I looked over my shoulder a few steps into my run. I saw the cherry of the cigarette fall to the ground, and a dark shape beginning to move after me. I didn't look back again, but I could hear someone running in the grass off of the footpath. I got to the entrance to my dorm building, and frantically waved my key card in front of the card reader that controlled the door lock. As soon as I hear the soft beep, I open the door, jump through the doorway, and shut the door quickly. I stopped and peered through the glass door. I saw the dark shape stop, just short of the lit pathway. I just watched for a minute or two. Then I saw the spark of a lighter. The light is just barely bright enough to illuminate a shaggy beard and brim of a baseball cap before it disappears, and was replaced with the red glow of a cigarette. I turned and headed up the stairs to my dorm room. By the time I get to my window, overlooking the same yard I had just run through, there is no trace of a dark figure or a cigarette cherry. After that, I didn't see that white-paneled van again, or smell that musty cigarette smell, and I hope I never do. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 194. Thank you very much to everyone who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'm still thinking of things to do for episode 200. It's only going to be a couple of weeks away now, and I'm kind of at a loss for ideas. Obviously it'll be a longer video. I think I might try and source some multi-part stories and put them together. That way I can still keep the 3 stories, because, well, just like with episode 100, it really wouldn't be a 3 True Scary Stories video if there's more than 3 stories. I'll see what I can come up with. I'm sure I'll get something together. Okay, and with that I think I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.